It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. UK stocks suffer their worst daily fall in 5 years as markets tumble over Donald Trump's trade tariffs. Fears of an international trade war intensify as China slaps retaliatory tariffs of its own on US imports. Also tonight, Russell Brand insists he's innocent after being charged with rape, sexual assault and indecent assault. Secret papers about an alleged Chinese spy reveal that the King had meetings with Prince Andrew about funding his future outside of royal duties. Plus, the rats running wild in Birmingham as the city's bin strike continues. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Fears about Donald Trump's trade tariffs have prompted more big falls on the markets, with UK stocks suffering their worst daily losses in more than 5 years. Concerns about a global trade war have intensified as China hits back against US tariffs, announcing a retaliatory levy of 34% on all American imports. Well, the FTSE 100 closed down 4.95%, a fall not seen since the start of the pandemic in March of 2020. There have been heavier losses in the United States, with the Nasdaq Composite closing in the last hour down 5.82%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down 5.5%, and the S&P 500 closed down 5.97%. In a moment, we'll examine what the slide on the markets means for UK businesses and consumers. But first, Sky's David Blevins reports from Washington on how President Trump is remaining bullish in the face of falling stock prices and China's retaliation.
This was the moment the real trade war began. China imposing its own tariffs on $160 billion of American goods.
The US practice is not in line with the rules of international trade and is a typical unilateral bullying practice.
As China hit back, Trump hit the golf course, away from the White House, but still furiously posting. China played it wrong. They panicked, he wrote. Hang tough, he urged Americans. Stocks turned red again, closing down over 5%, the worst week since the start of the pandemic, plunging too in Europe and the UK. Face to face with America's NATO allies, Trump's top diplomat, arriving late and playing down the economic risks.
No, their economies are not crashing. The markets are reacting. No, their economies are not crashing. Their markets are reacting to a dramatic change in the global order in terms of trade. And so what happens is pretty straightforward. If you're a company and you make a bunch of your products in China, and all of a sudden shareholders or people that play the stock market realize that it's going to cost a lot more to produce in China, your stock is going to go down.
Warnings, though, from the man charged with keeping US inflation in check, striking a somber note.
It is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. The size and duration of these effects remains uncertain. While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent.
That's a potential game changer for a nation that's benefited from an open market. With free trade, America lost manufacturing jobs but gained cheap goods, many of them made in places like China. But now that the president wants those manufacturing jobs back, it seems the days of cheap goods made in places like China are over. And that's bad news for Americans when it comes to the price of their shopping.
That means the prices are going to go up on the consumer. So we're going to pay.
I'm extremely worried about the prices going up because it's affecting our families here in America. So yes, I'm very worried about that.
So do you think the government's making a mistake?
I do.
So what's your message to the president?
Stop it.
A trade war made in America could see the world on the road to a global recession. A Trump-made one. But the president isn't changing course. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
So, with UK stocks taking a battering, how could a global trade war affect British businesses and consumers? Downing Street says the Prime Minister will be engaging with other world leaders over the weekend to try to mitigate the impact on the UK. Our political correspondent Tamara Cohen reports on how some businesses are already feeling the squeeze.
This London menswear brand thrives on its many American customers. Its owner is working out how hard Donald Trump's tariffs will hit.
It's so capricious, and his mood seems to change the whole time. I mean, maybe he'll go out and have a bad English breakfast next day, and what do you know, we'll go 50% tariffs. It's just it's so difficult to plan and strategise.
Most of these shirts are manufactured in Portugal, but sold here in the UK.
What are these tariffs going to mean for the prices that you charge your customers?
Best case scenario is our customers are looking at a 10% increase. Worst case is a 20% increase. Now, we might be able to absorb a little bit of that to help them out. We might be able to do a discount code, a voucher code online for those customers that order from us. It'll be a different story here in the shop.
Simon had made preparations for trade barriers by moving some production out of China and into Thailand. But it turns out he made the wrong ones.
We found a superb factory in Thailand, so we're all set to press the button.
Not thinking it would have the same impact.
Exactly, yes. Well, at that stage, Thailand was tariff-free. What happens? I wake up this morning, nearly choke on my Weetabix, it's 36%.
It's been another day of tumbling prices here at the London Stock Exchange, with uncertain impact for people's pensions and savings. The message from ministers is to keep calm as they try and strike a deal which might limit the impact.
It is allowed about it, yeah.
On a visit to talk about late licensing at a jazz club, Rachel Reeves tried to sound upbeat about US trade negotiations, which are at an early stage.
We want to do everything in our power, and we'll continue to do everything in our power to get the best possible deal for British industry, working closely with them to protect prosperity and jobs here in the UK.
President Trump had said the UK was happy with the 10% tariff. The Foreign Secretary in Brussels appeared less convinced.
All options are on the table as we ensure the national interests of the British people, who will be very concerned at this time about how this affects the bottom line for them.
Businesses are scrambling to protect themselves. The Prime Minister says he'll protect Britain's interests in talks with other leaders over the weekend. It may be weeks before the implications for global trade are fully mapped out. Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
Sky's David Blevins joins us now from Washington, D.C. And David, defiance we've seen from President Trump. He says the tariffs will never change, but the markets aren't at all happy.
Yes, the US markets are deeply unhappy. It's only the fourth time in history that the Dow has lost more than 2,000 points in a single day. The Nasdaq closed in bear market. That's the opposite of bull market. It means there's been a 20% drop from a recent high, and that's the feared trajectory. In fact, the Dow, Nasdaq and S&P 500 have all recorded their worst week since the year 2000. That's because the world's two largest economies, America and China, are now engaged in battle. One Wall Street bank says there will be blood, and that's before other countries even decide whether or not they're going to retaliate against Trump tariffs. But there's no sign of economic or political crisis around the president. He seems fairly relaxed, playing golf in Florida and urging Americans to hold their nerve. But the Americans I spoke to today while they were out shopping are very nervous, not just about the potential rise in prices, but about the potential for recession. They're urging him, many of them, to turn back. But to borrow a phrase from a former British Prime Minister, it seems the gentleman is not for turning.
We shall see. David, thank you. Well, as the UK contends with a trade war across the Atlantic, it is now working against the clock to secure the future of steelmaking at Scunthorpe. Britain's last remaining blast furnaces, which produce virgin steel, are in imminent danger of closing down. Sky News understands the Queen Anne furnace in Scunthorpe only has enough raw material to last until the 23rd of May, and the government has so far been unable to secure a deal with the Chinese-owned British Steel to keep the plant running beyond that. Our economics editor, Ed Conway, has been given rare access to the Scunthorpe steelworks.
They've been making steel on this site for 150 years. Its fate will be decided in the next few days. As British Steel prepares for its potential closure, Sky News has secured exclusive access to its iron and steel-making operations in Scunthorpe. This is the first time cameras have been allowed in here for half a decade. And at the heart of it all is this. One of the 2 remaining blast furnaces, Queen Anne. What you're looking at behind us, that is the base of one of the blast furnaces here in Scunthorpe at British Steel. What they're doing is they're taking iron ore and essentially melting it down to a form of lava, for want of a better term, and that pure iron then goes on to become steel. Making virgin steel is one of the bedrocks of the Industrial Revolution that happened here in this country, but now this is the last remaining place where it is made. It's the last one. And what you're looking at here might well be one of the last taps of molten iron out of here, because if something doesn't change, then within a matter of weeks, potentially days, this place could be shut down.
We are on real threat of losing these furnaces. We run out of materials for the direct charge process on the 23rd of May. If we don't hit the order deadline, the lead time takes us over what we've got left.
And it really is a matter of weeks.
It is, yeah. I'd go as far to say days.
Days?
Yes, days. We have deadlines for next week for ordering. If we miss them deadlines, we come to a point where we'll have to make a decision on whether we turn them both off.
That's far sooner than the timetable given by the company's Chinese owners, Jingye. They recently rejected a £500 million grant from the government to modernise the site and reduce its emissions. But unless the Chinese company comes to an agreement with the government, the site could be closed, putting 3,000 jobs at risk. The steel sector's representative says the ball is in the government's court.
Talks seems to have broken down between government and British Steel to come to a deal, and my advice to government is, please, Jonathan Reynolds, Business Secretary, get back round that negotiating table, thrash out a deal, and if a deal can't be found in the next few days, then I fear for the very future of the sector, but also here for Scunthorpe Steelworks.
This plant provides 90% of the rails on Britain's network, as well as vital construction steel that helped build skyscrapers in New York, Malaysia and here in the UK. Now, its fate hangs in the balance. Even as Britain faces a trade war across the Atlantic, it must now contend with another historic moment, the forced sunset of a foundation industry, taking thousands of jobs and livelihoods with it. These may be among the last glimpses we ever see of virgin steelmaking in this country. Ed Conway, Sky News in Scunthorpe.
The comedian and actor Russell Brand has been charged with 2 counts of rape, sexual assault and indecent assault. He denies the allegations. Our correspondent Ashna Hernag is with me now and has been following this story. These allegations materialised some time ago, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right, Gillian. Detectives began investigating the 50-year-old comedian back in September 2023 after the airing of a Channel 4 Dispatches documentary and alongside a Times and Sunday Times investigation that revealed a number of allegations which the police began looking into and relate to these charges today. They include the fact that a woman was allegedly raped in the Bournemouth area in 1999, and then there were further 3 other incidents in London. In 2001, a woman was indecently assaulted. In 2004, another woman was orally raped and sexually assaulted. And then between 2004 and 2005, another woman was also sexually assaulted. The Metropolitan Police today have said that they have now written to Brand and have charged him with the following offences: 1 count of rape, another of indecent assault, 1 of oral rape and 2 counts of sexual assault. The charges relate to 4 separate women and alleged to have taken place between 1999 and 2005. We've also heard from the detective a superintendent that's now leading this investigation, the Metropolitan Police. He has said in a statement that the women who have made these reports continue to receive support from specially trained officers. The Met's investigation, he says, remains open, and detectives ask anyone who's been affected by this case or anyone who has any information to come forward and speak with police. Well, since these charges, Brand has taken to social media to further deny these allegations.
What I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes. I want to thank all of you for your continuing support. And of course, I'm now going to have the opportunity to defend these charges in court, and I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Well, Brand has been a comedian and actor that people will be familiar with. He's been on our screens for decades, rising up through the comedy circuit, initially starting out in stand-up and then moving into broadcasting and hosting duties, working on national television programmes, but also radio shows as well, working for the likes of the BBC and Channel 4 and starring in a number of Hollywood films. He will now appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Friday, the 2nd of May.
OK, Ashna, thank you. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says an Israeli strike on a school has killed at least 27 people, including 14 children. The building was reportedly being used as a shelter for displaced families. Israel says it was targeting an Hamas command and control centre and had attempted to minimise harm to civilians. Benjamin Netanyahu has announced plans to further divide Gaza and seize new parts of it, having re-established control of a buffer zone around the Strip and the Netzarim corridor, a military zone cutting the north off from the south. Part of that plan is the proposed new security zone, the Morag corridor, which would divide Rafah in the south of Gaza from the rest of the Strip. Israeli forces have issued a fresh evacuation warning for Sajaya near Gaza City as part of an operation, they say, to deepen control and expand that security buffer zone. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says at least 100 Palestinians were killed in strikes across the Strip yesterday, including more than 30 in Sajaya, and at least 27 people at a school sheltering the displaced near Gaza City. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this report and a warning it does contain distressing images.
This was the moment Israeli airstrikes hit a school in Gaza City on Friday morning. Inside the courtyard, there was chaos. I counted 6 bodies in this video, some of them children. The health ministry in Gaza says at least 27 were killed. Israel says it was a Hamas command and control centre. They've not yet provided any evidence of that. It was, though, a place of shelter for hundreds of families. The many wounded were rushed to hospital, some of them with life-threatening injuries. Doctors say the death toll will probably rise.
Sadly, while waiting for surgery, several of the injured were martyred due to the lack of available operating rooms and medical staff. This is, without a doubt, primarily due to the blockade imposed on Gaza.
Israel is rapidly expanding its renewed assault on Gaza and meeting little opposition from Hamas. Palestinians are being forced to flee from all parts of the Strip, most with no idea where they will go or how they will live.
We've been displaced 10 times now, from the south to the north and then from the north to the south. I'm leaving not knowing where to go. There's no money or shelter to stay in.
We don't have blankets or bedding. We can hardly walk. My wife and I have been walking for 3 hours, covering a kilometre. I'm going to search for shelter. I'm searching for shelter every hour now, not every day.
Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes on Gaza since it broke the ceasefire more than 2 weeks ago. It is pushing its forces deeper by the day, retaking land, possibly indefinitely, and operating in areas it previously hadn't. The purpose is to put pressure on Hamas to release the 59 remaining hostages. So far, Hamas is refusing to surrender. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Documents released as part of a Home Office case into an alleged Chinese spy have revealed the King had meetings with Prince Andrew about funding his future outside of royal duties. One of the Prince's former aides told an immigration tribunal last year that the royals discussed how Prince Andrew could try to rebuild his reputation. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock is here. And Laura, what else did we learn about how the Prince might be rehabilitated in his future?
Quite a bit, actually. This whole saga involving Prince Andrew, his most trusted aide, and an alleged Chinese spy just continues. And the release of this new document is now dragging into the saga both the King and the late Queen. We now know that they've had meetings to discuss what to do with Andrew following that absolutely car crash interview he gave. And interestingly, Andrew's most trusted aide, his most senior advisor at the time, has written this witness statement and talked about this. He said, over the last 6 months, despite not being a member of the royal household, this is Dominic Hampshire, I have had 2 meetings with the Duke and His Majesty to discuss what the Duke can do moving forwards in a way that is acceptable to His Majesty, which shows that the King is very aware of the ongoing plans and what might happen, as was, we hear, the late Queen. We also hear how this alleged spy, who has denied all those allegations, was seen as the only light at the end of the tunnel for Andrew. And we also learn, as we've heard before, that the intelligence services had raised concerns about the relationship between the two. It's interesting what Dominic Hampshire has to say about the fallout from that notorious interview. He says this: it was clear that the Duke's reputation was irrecoverable. This was a common feeling within the royal household, despite what the Duke thought may happen. It was very clear internally within the royal household that we would have to look at options for the Duke's future away from royal duties. Now, one of those options was looking at international work and an expansion of Pitchet Palace, the Duke of York's quite widely seen as a success scheme that was a bit like Dragon's Den. We also learn how they were sneaking people in and out of meetings to see the Duke, and Dominic Hampshire at one point makes allegations that the palace was leaking information all the time. Leaks are everywhere at all sorts of levels. Now, because the King's name has been mentioned, Buckingham Palace has really been forced into issuing a statement. They've said nothing in the past because Andrew's no longer a working royal, but tonight, this from the palace: while His Majesty met with the Duke and his advisor to hear outline proposals for independent funding over the past year, the individual known as H6, that's Mr. Yang, was not mentioned at any time or in any way as part of these discussions. So the palace keen to distance the King and, of course, themselves from the alleged spy. And I think what all this does is show that Prince Andrew's past just continues to haunt him. And he does still pose this real problem for the King in terms of what does Andrew do in the future? And more importantly, how is he going to be financed?
Laura, thank you very much for that update. South Korea's president has been removed from office 4 months after his controversial call to impose martial law. Yoon Suk-yeol's decision to send troops onto the streets led to the country's worst political crisis in decades. The South Korean Constitutional Court upheld the decision to impeach him, saying the Conservative leader had violated his duty as Commander-in-Chief. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith reports.
It was a nervous wait. At 11 a.m, the city stopped to watch. And then this. In the end, the court was unanimous. President Yoon should be impeached. It was a fine line between joy and emotion. So much, they felt, was at stake.
It's just a wonderful day for Korean people, and not only for Korean people, but also for all over the world who is working for democracy.
너무 좋아요. I feel so good. I feel so good. I feel like I am born in a new world.
Today they paraded his picture as if it were his funeral. It was only in December that his sudden declaration of martial law blindsided this nation. He now faces criminal prosecution, his reputation battered.
There is a real sense of jubilation here, but there is relief too, because amidst the party atmosphere, there's a sense that people felt they were on something of a precipice, that if this hadn't gone their way, the consequences would have been far more broad than just who holds power.
They're cheering Kim Sung-wook's name here, a man who says freedom itself was at stake. He was the only member of Yoon's party to defy instructions and vote on his leader's impeachment.
The history of South Korea's democracy was built on the blood and struggle of the Korean people. We decide today whether we can defend our democracy or whether our democracy will fail.
This country's authoritarian past weighs heavy in memories here. It explains the high emotion and the high degree of readiness. In the end, there was no violence amongst those left disappointed, but there was division and disaffection in spades. The echoes with America are striking. Just listen to Choi Kum-ja, who runs a political channel on YouTube. The other side, now cast as the enemy.
They want South Korea to become communist, and justices are selling off the country for money. I really wish they would go to China or North Korea. They are not our people.
Some believe it was polarization that led President Yoon to this, the army unleashed on lawmakers. In a brief statement, Yoon expressed his gratitude and regret, the first time his defiance has failed him. It won't have mattered to those who gathered to cheer his departure, those who see tonight as a bright moment in history. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Seoul.
Just want to bring you a bit of breaking news that we're receiving via the Associated Press news agency, and that is that a tsunami warning has been issued for Papua New Guinea after a strong magnitude 6.9 earthquake. That is all that we have at the moment, but of course we'll keep you updated on that developing story throughout the course of the evening. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials say at least 14 people, including 6 children, have been killed in a Russian missile strike. 50 other people are reported to have been wounded in the attack on the central city of Kryvyi Rih. Donald Trump says he has signed an order to keep TikTok operating in America for another 75 days. The US president has extended the deadline for the video app to be sold to a non-Chinese buyer or face a ban on national security grounds. An anti-abortion campaigner has been found guilty of 2 counts of breaching a buffer zone, restricting protests outside a clinic in Bournemouth. 64-year-old Livia Tosici-Bolt held a sign that said, "Here to talk if you want." The case drew international attention from the United States, with the Trump administration saying that the UK must respect freedom of expression. The government has told the Unite Union to get around the table and end the bin strikes in Birmingham as thousands of tons of waste continue to pile up across the city. The uncollected rubbish is a prime target for rodents, with fears for the health of residents. A warning: this report from our Midlands correspondent Lisa Dowd contains images of a dead rodent.
The dark crevices of Birmingham's streets are teeming with rats.
There's a family down there.
Because all around the city, conditions are perfect for them to thrive. And they're going nowhere.
Good spot for the rats?
Yeah, it's another favourable spot for the rats. Again, plenty of food here.
Yeah, you can smell it, can't you?
And now it's starting to decompose. And again, that will be also attracting the rats to the area.
The rat catchers are spotting signs of them everywhere.
So this is our thermal imaging camera. But what we're looking for is any kind of red spots, that may be moving.
Do you think that was one there?
Yeah.
Does that look like a tail?
Yeah.
The rodents are getting so brazen, they're scaring away the very agency workers brought in to try to clear up the city while the strike is on.
Even when all of this is cleared away, there could still be a problem here. The rats know that there was food here, so they're going to keep coming back. And when they don't find it, that is when they could end up in people's houses looking for more food. And you've seen rats here?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah,
how many?
Especially at night. Are about like 6 or 7. I think I'm worried that it's gonna come over to my flat. or to everyone here, because we're not too much far from the rubbish.
Even a dead rat is a risk.
The interesting thing about that now is blowflies are now attracted to that, and then you can have 4,000 blowflies just from one dead rat.
There he is. Yeah.
So far, they are the only winners in this dispute, and there's no sign of it ending. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, that was at Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight we're joined by PR consultant Alex Dean and Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Eye, its headline, Crisis Talks to Safeguard the UK amid fears of a global recession. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. UK stocks have suffered their biggest daily fall since the start of the COVID pandemic in response to Donald Trump's global trade tariffs. It came as China applied its own retaliatory tariffs to American imports. stoking fears of an international trade war. Russell Brand has been charged with rape, sexual assault and indecent assault by the Metropolitan Police. He says he's innocent. New documents released as part of a Home Office case into an alleged Chinese spy have revealed the King had meetings with Prince Andrew about funding his future outside of royal duties. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages of the newspapers as they come into us. It's time to see what's making the headlines with PR consultant Alex Dean and Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Eye leads on the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs on the markets today. Its headline, Crisis Talks to Safeguard the UK Amid Fears of a Global Recession. The Financial Times features a picture of the US president with his fist in the air as he remains defiant in the face of an intensifying trade war and plunging stocks. The Times focuses on China's announcement of retaliatory tariffs, a 34% levy on all US goods, after the country accused Trump of unilateral bullying. The Mirror reports on the allegations of rape and sexual assault made against the comedian Russell Brand, which he denies. The Sun also leads on that story. The Mail carries claims that the King has been drawn into the Chinese spy scandal involving Prince Andrew, as does the Telegraph. The King caught in Andrew spy row is the headline there. The Daily Express leads on the King and Queen state visit to Italy on Monday, saying the King is healthy and raring to go. And the Star is drumming up excitement ahead of the hot weather expected this weekend, 22 degrees as the races take place. They're anticipating sizzling barbecues, parties and a tanned national. Lots to look forward to there. And we're joined tonight by Alex Dean and Zoe Williams to take us through the newspapers. Welcome to you both. Well, let's start with the continuing story, lead story of the fallout from Donald Trump's tariffs. We'll start with the Eye. Headline there, Crisis Talks to Safeguard UK amid fears of global recession. And this is pointing to the talks that Sir Keir Starmer will be having with leaders this weekend. Alex?
Yeah, he's speaking initially to the Prime Ministers of Italy and Australia, and will speak to others as the week unfolds. Look, countries faced with tariffs like this can capitulate, negotiate, or retaliate. And we're seeing how people are planning to respond in real time. The newspapers are carrying the news of China's retaliatory tariffs in place. Singapore has said it's going to capitulate and then seek to negotiate. So not take retaliatory tariffs, but seek to explain to the Americans that they don't deserve the tariffs that they've got. The United Kingdom's position is different. We've said we're going to have a 30-day consultation period, so businesses, those affected by tariffs, can get in touch with government and make clear what this would mean to them, including, of course, the fact that their businesses might export to the EU, and that finished product might then go on to the US under a higher tariff rate, which would matter for them as well. And then the government will form a view thereafter. One of the troubles for them is that lots of economic logic might be to maintain a unilateral low tariff position, not respond, protect our consumers by not forcing up prices, which is what tariffs do. They're inflationary and they push prices up. But the political imperative to be seen to be responding to Trump and to be seen to be taking action to defend British industries, which I think is false, by the way, but there'll be a lot of pressure to do that, will be very strong.
Zoe, do you think that the UK will retaliate after this consultation period with business?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because essentially, the only people who want the UK to take joint action with the EU are the Lib Dems. Both the Conservatives are cock-a-hoop because they're like, this is finally a Brexit benefit, that we haven't been rolled into the same tariffs as the EU. We have our own, and they are significantly lower. The Labour Party, Keir Starmer's entire shtick for the whole time he's been Prime Minister has been, I am a cool head and I don't make any sudden moves. And that finally seems to be a meaningful line in this situation. He's decided not to make any sudden moves, so he's not going to. And you know, as I say, it's quite a rare voice in the territory saying we should be on the same page as our European allies. Because even if we're not in the same tariff regimen as them, which we're not, you have to pick some allies. You can't. You have to pick a side in the end. If you say, "Oh, hallelujah, we've got lower tariffs than everybody else. Let's just make the most of it," it's quite an important failure of solidarity and comradeship, which will bite us should we ever fall foul of Donald Trump, which I guarantee we will. You know, he's quixotic.
Alex, is this the time to show solidarity with the EU?
Look, it's not about whether the UK's with the EU or not. It's the rest of the world having to respond to the US rolling out tariffs everywhere. Our trading partners all over the world are going to suffer as a result of this. And I don't think anyone's cock a hoop about us, inverted commas, only having 10% tariffs with the United States. That's bad, right? Any businessman or woman watching tonight thinking about losing 10% of their profit would think to themselves, hang on a minute, or their turnover might think to themselves, my God, this is absolutely terrible.
Although Donald Trump is saying that Sir Keir Starmer's very happy with the 10%.
Well, I don't think any political leader is going to be happy about having tariffs imposed by their most important trading and political ally. So that's for the birds. But moreover, in an interconnected economy, tariffs anywhere hurt people everywhere. We trade not just with the European Union, we trade with China and India and countries all across Africa and South America. And those countries are going to, those countries' economies are going to have negative impacts which will affect us too and affect our consumers.
Oh, yeah, quite. I mean, nobody was saying tariffs were a good thing, but there are certainly members
apart from Donald Trump.
There are certainly people on the pro-Brexit side in the British political landscape saying, look, finally we've got a Brexit benefit, which I think is misguided. I don't think anybody should be celebrating anything.
Let's talk about China, because they're one of the countries retaliating, hitting with reciprocal tariffs of 34%. Although I know, Alex, you don't think there's any such thing as a reciprocal tariff, but they're accusing the United States of unilateral bullying.
Which is, I mean, is a pretty reasonable position to take, given that the Americans have imposed this on the maths being used by our friends in America to come up with the number is so ferociously arbitrary. So they've said, what's the trade deficit we have with a country? Half that, and that's going to be the number of additional tariffs. Now, I accept that not just Trump, but White House for many years now have had an issue with the way that China behaves in economic terms. They don't respect patents, they rip off products, they don't follow international law norms, they prop up businesses with state ownership and seek to circumvent the rules on that state activity. They may or may not conduct industrial espionage. There are all sorts of legitimate complaints you can have. But to impose arbitrary tariffs like this, to me, seems a very foolish way to go about things. And remember, the 34 points that he's put on China is on top of the 20 that was already there. Now, China responds with a 34 percentage point tariff to the Americans. But many businesses in the United States were already paying a tariff to trade into China. So, for example, I know their agricultural sector is much more important to their economy than ours, not being dismissive of our farmers, it's just a larger part of their economy. They were either paying 10 or 15% already, depending on what kind of farmer they were. Well, 15% on top of 54, it's basically you're not going to be trading. And that they can go somewhere else for chicken or sorghum or whatever it is that the Americans were selling to them. It's a world market. These are not products that you're going to find hard to source somewhere else. Whereas, for example, the Chinese activity in rare earth minerals might prove rather more difficult to replace.
I mean, Donald Trump saying that, just to quote Trump here, Zoe, that they played it wrong, they panicked, the one thing they cannot afford to do. And he's saying this is a great time to get rich, richer than ever before. So
the language around the Chinese is incredibly bellicose. I didn't actually catch whether it was Vance or somebody else, but they were explaining the high tariffs on China as we've been borrowing from Chinese peasants to buy the goods that they make. That isn't the way to make anybody rich. And it was really extraordinary. It was quite. It was quite violent language, actually, and I think they're crossing a road to pick a fight.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because whilst I wouldn't speak in the way this administration does about a lot of things, on this one, Trump's been way out in front in his criticism of China, quite famously in the campaigning that he did before the White House and in between his terms in the White House. But of course, President Obama instituted tariffs against China to seek to protect American industry prior to that, a position that Democrats widely supported. So some of this is very plainly just for the domestic audience in the United States. I'm not saying that's not important. That's the prime motivator for most politicians. But, you know, he has always believed in protective tariffs as a useful way of advancing an economic situation for his country, which I just think is completely wrong and debunked by most economists in the world today.
I think as well, though, that there's a kind of underlying sense that that the trade war is just an overture in a new era of aggression, of kind of overt aggression.
So
is, you know, that is something to think about. Whether they follow it up, I don't know.
Well, in the FT, just to bring in another front page quickly, the Peterson Institute of International Economics is calculating that the average American tariffs on Chinese goods would rise to 76%, well above the 60% Trump threatened in last year's election campaign.
Because so many of them have got tariffs on them already.
Yeah. We'll leave that tariffs for the moment and take a break. Thank you. A royal bombshell. The court papers revealing how the king's been drawn into a China spy storm. More on that when we come back.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Premier League Run-In is live on NBC and Peacock as City Pride is on the line with a pair of iconic derbies.
It doesn't get any better.
Thursday, it's a London derby. Chelsea.
Beautiful goal from Chelsea.
Spurs.
What a game!
Then Sunday,
brace yourself, Manchester, for the mother of all derbies.
United.
In the place!
City. The Premier League Run-In is live on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to the press preview. Still with me, Alex and Zoe. And by popular demand, although I said otherwise before the break, we're going to continue talking about tariffs. Just a couple more points, really just springing off the fact that global stock markets plunged for a second consecutive day as investments reacted to the trade war, the international trade war sparked by Donald Trump's tariffs.
And some people will think, what do I care? I don't play the stock market. But if you've got a pension, then your pension is invested in the very self-same stocks and shares that have taken a bath because of the manoeuvring undertaken by the White House. These last 2 days have wiped out circa 11 months of gains. Now, you can pick out individual stocks and shares that have fared differently, but the overall picture looks like that. About a year's worth of success taken off in 2 days. That is not good. But the second point I wanted to make was Zoe was asking before the break, does this get worse than just trade and tariff issues? And you don't have to get all the way to that to think about how this can become worse economically, because if they're serious, the real question now is, are they serious about negotiating about what we can do to get rid of some of the tariffs they've imposed? And if they are serious about having that discussion, then we'll have conversations that lots of people in this country won't like. Chlorine-washed chicken, hormone-injected beef, access to the NHS, things that stymied trade deals last time, but you can at least have that conversation. The worst scenario is they're really not that serious about having a debate. They see tariffs as the way of life for the future. And if that's the position the Americans take, and people gather that, I mean, to get down to 7.5%, they expect us to completely overhaul VAT, for example, which is one of the things they were objecting to, then we wind up much closer to seeing lots of countries around the world taking retaliatory action and tariffs becoming the new norm.
But actually, what we were talking about was trade war becoming hot war, and whether or not these measures, these tariff measures, legitimising a way of talking about geopolitics and other countries that is inherently, aggressive.
Look,
and a way potentially of negotiating. I mean, we're hearing unverified reports from other media outlets that President Trump is actually negotiating now, right this minute, with Vietnam, India and Israel. So was it just a jump-off point to start negotiations, and the tariffs will never come to pass?
Well, that may be the case, and of course that's the kind of trick he played with Canada and Mexico before, where respectively on migration and fentanyl, he said, I'm going to impose these things unless you change your stance, and they both did. The difference, I mean, the situation in China is generational. It's not something you can flip all of a sudden. I see the point on Vietnam and co, one of the world's fastest growing economies, a huge population. You'd want to do a deal and you want to have low tariff arrangements. But what's he going to do with somewhere like Singapore, which doesn't have any tariffs on the US to start with? I mean, they don't have anything to give. So they're expecting you to realise that what you've done in the first place was a mistake. And that's one thing I think this White House is very bad at, right, saying we got it wrong.
The other thing...
Last point.
Well, the other thing is that it is actually quite a useful way for Trump to keep his own business and corporate sector obedient to him, because it gives you a huge amount of power over your own industries if you can, at your own discretion, have tariffs on one thing and no tariffs on another, negotiate with one area and not with another. It just gives you the kind of power which presidents, indeed no democratically held office, typically has.
OK, just got time to look at this story concerning Prince Andrew and the King, covered by the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph. And this is the King being drawn into the China spy storm. Allegedly had meetings with Prince Andrew about his future funding as he stepped away from being a working royal, Alex.
After Prince Andrew's disastrous interview with Emily Maitlis, he came off royal duties. And when that happens, you come off the royal allowances. And so it was natural that the King was going to have a conversation with him to say, well, what are you going to do now? I think that's what most brothers might say when their brother took an enormous hit on income. But what's been revealed by Prince Andrew's so-called fixer, Dominic Hampshire, is that in the course of those conversations, which were basically illicit, they were smuggled into Windsor Castle to have them with the King, the specific subject of the fund in which Yang Tengbo was involved, the person alleged to be involved in espionage of China, who's been banned from the United Kingdom, that was one of the things Prince Andrew said he would do in order to ensure that he still had an income.
And the story is that the King knew about that.
Well, if your brother tells you, by definition, you know of it. And that's what Hampshire's recollection in his evidence says.
Sorry?
I mean, You know that I'm not as much of a royalist as Alex is, but I'm kind of inclined. It wouldn't have been. I don't want to defend the king, right? But it wouldn't have been the time to say, you've effectively been stripped of royal duties, but I'm also going to block you from making money any other way. So if it happens that there was a brief grey area in which Andrew floated an idea that was actually really unwise, I still wouldn't be inclined to blame Charles for it. I would still be more likely to blame Andrew for it.
You'd hope there'd be some sort of apparatus that said, we should do some due diligence before you get involved with them. Because what you do doesn't just reflect on you, it reflects on all of us.
But listen, if you'd done due diligence before Andrew had got involved with things, that would have started quite a long time ago, right?
Yeah, OK.
I mean...
Epstein and co.
He seems to make his own choices.
Indeed. Zoe and Alex, thank you very much for the moment. Let us take a look at the weather for you now.